All right, so the pernicious mission creep into the thermonuclear apocalypse continues in the last 24 hours, unabated, as Finland decides that it is going to be shuttering its borders completely on November 30th with the Russians. Finland just became a member of NATO, the country that has a bunker for pretty much everybody who lives there, and they're already shutting the borders with Russia. Simultaneous with that, they're running an exercise with NATO that not only simulates a blockade on Kaliningrad, Russia's primary strategic exclave, but also is going to be simulating an embargo or blockade of the Gulf of Finland, which is another point of access from St. Petersburg. So if there was ever a good time to buy bug-out property, it was years ago. The second best time is most definitely now. Now, what you're seeing behind me here is the USS Dwight Eisenhower nuclear ticking time bomb on waves, I like to call it, which is currently traversing the Strait of Hormuz. Footage courtesy of a very unstable telephoto lens brought to us by the Iranian Air Force. It's likely that unstable because this aircraft that is taking these pictures is very high in the sky. Thankfully for them, it was a clear day. Now, Iran is clearly showcasing their ability to not only detect and identify and track this carrier strike group throughout its gallivants in the Persian Gulf, but they're also perhaps signaling that they have the ability to take it out. Understand that nuclear-powered aircraft carriers have a nuclear reactor. It's very likely that some ships within this strike group are even carrying nuclear weapons. Because if the threat is potentially going to war with Iran, and don't kid yourself, that's exactly what this is about, then they would most definitely need nuclear weapons to get the job done. They're not fighting that war successfully without nuclear weapons. I think bunker busters are not going to cut it. These underground bases that Iran has are dug in way too deep. Forget about a ground campaign. Never going to happen in Iran. Not in a million years would that be successful. You need millions of troops, I believe. But with nuclear weapons, if they can sneak a few of those through, well, that's another story. But many people forget there's been many aircraft carriers sunk throughout history. None of this size and none with the technology and the multi-layered air defense systems that these strike group carriers have. However, we're also entering a new age of technology. And these aircraft carriers were developed, a lot of them, before the advent of drone swarms, before hypersonic missiles. I'm sure there's been advances in attack submarines and just naval attack drones. So they have to contend with a lot more now. And eventually, you're going to run out of ammo when you're on a ship. And these ships do require maintenance. The guns require maintenance. If you were to send a volley of hundreds, if not thousands, waves after waves of missiles, eventually you would sink the thing. And then what would happen is you'd have a radiological event at the bottom of the ocean. There would be a massive salvage operation attempt, which would likely fail because they would be under the constant barrage of Iranian missiles. And the Iranians might be able to get them a few F-35s or whatever they have on this thing right now. I guess I should have researched that, because if they don't have their best equipment on there, that might be quite telling, because that might indicate that maybe they are worried about this thing being sunk, if it's like the old F-18s or whatever. But understand, this is a ticking time bomb, these things. And you're looking at fuel, millions of liters of fuel. You have tons of ammunition on these things. I'm sure it's stored in such a way that a single attack is not going to necessarily bring this thing down. And of course, you have to bring down all of the warships that surround it. But this is a very precarious situation, especially if you're in one of these coastal countries. You may be tasked with the cleanup when the smoke clears. Now, maybe this is what they want. Maybe they are hoping to get the attention of the Iranians in the wrong way. Because understand, when this ceasefire breaks, and when the grievances of Israeli families are redressed, I guess you could say, in the best way that the Netanyahu government can in order to stay in power, because they need a war to continue to stay in power, then the war is going to flare up massively. Because you'll notice right now, the attacks on U.S. bases have subsided for the time being. The attacks on the Lebanese border with Israel have subsided for the time being. But the word is coming from the Israeli Ministry of Defense that they're just waiting for this thing to end to completely unleash hell on the Gaza Strip. And at that time, they will have the blessing of not the entirety of the Israeli population, because not all of Israelis agree with the approach that they're taking in the Gaza Strip. But it will be a major hurdle overcome. And of course, because interest in the issue has waned, people have burnt out, as they typically do. People got all really riled up and excited. I'm not saying that you bomb a few hospitals and then it's back in the news. However, we're coming into winter now. So there's been strategic moves made that take into account the weather, and it's harder to protest in the wintertime. It's just a fact, okay? Now, again, there have been nuclear naval vessels that have been sunk over time. In fact, 9 nuclear submarines have been sunk. Most of them are sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and I don't think many of them were recovered. So this is a potential dirty bomb on waves. And it's, I think, exactly what they need to happen in order to galvanize the American populace towards a war. I think the only thing that's going to do it is, you might get there with an American military base and, 50 dead soldiers or something like that. But sinking of an aircraft carrier, that's guaranteed blank check, carte blanche for whatever you want for the military-industrial complex for at least the next 5 years. And so maybe that's what they're hoping for. Maybe they're hoping that the Yemenis try something. Maybe they're just going to, I dropped something while the missiles are inbound. You never know. You just never know, guys. But there's a reason for all these shenanigans, I assure you. Now, let's talk about what's going on in other parts of the world. Finland is shutting its border completely. The reason why? 900 immigrants in a month. Now think about that. They're shutting this entire border. This is a very large border. It doesn't look that large compared to the United States map. We got to get is it the Mercator map? The accurate map? But this is a long-ass border. I mean, just this length right here is 330 kilometers. So we're talking thousands of, maybe not thousands, but a couple thousand kilometers of border. They're going to shutter that completely and compromise their $1 billion in trade, which a lot of it has already been compromised by sanctions, I would presume. But this is major. So what does that tell you? They're shutting their border for only 900 immigrants. Something's weird about that. Remember, Finland, one of the biggest prepper countries in the world, just joined NATO, currently doing exercises so that they can block St. Petersburg from accessing the Gulf of Finland in cahoots with Estonia. That's the plan. Do some sort of blockade. I guess they wish for death because, Helsinki? I mean, that ain't too far from St. Petersburg. That's literally like, boom, it's done, it's over. So Helsinki's gone, but they're planning on living out the rest of their days in the bunkers. I don't know. If you're in Finland and you watch the channel, let me know what the thinking is there. I know people talk about World War II and how the Russians kind of, sort of, almost failed, but didn't really entirely fail when they were trying to take Finland. But, is that really a valid comparison, or was it World War I? I can't remember. I'm not a good historian, guys. I'm still learning a lot about geopolitics. But I'm a quick learner. So let me know what the mood is there surrounding all of this border stuff. Something isn't right about closing an entire border for 1,000 immigrants. That just doesn't seem, something seems off about that. It seems very excessive for them to go to that extent. Now, some people are probably thinking, great, cut them off. I mean, especially when you got millions of people coming in through the U.S. border. Why is that permitted and this is viewed as, that's permitted, this is viewed as unacceptable. Now, the Russians, of course, deny that they are trying to create an artificially induced immigrant crisis but it's hard to deny that. I mean, how the hell are they getting all the way up here and keeping warm in the cold and keeping them on buses? It just doesn't make any sense. So either the theory that the Russians are trying to provoke an Iron Curtain of their own, trying to create contempt for Russians abroad and create Russophobia so that Russians don't leave in order to embolden the country from a nationalist point of view and potentially keep would-be soldiers in the country. Or this really is NATO preparing to go to war with the Russians and trying to provoke the Russians. Because the Russians are going to interpret this current exercise that is going on with 5,000 NATO troops as trying to block off Kaliningrad, so they have no more warm water access to the Baltic Sea. I'm sure this probably freezes over in winter to some extent, so it's not considered a warm water port, but cut them off from there. That's a big strategic defeat because that gives NATO free rein in the Baltic Sea to potentially supply the Baltic states, which of course are bordering right up against Russia. I mean, they got Peskov Airport right here that Ukraine tried to target. You remember that? Ukraine actually successfully targeted a couple nuclear bombers that were there. And we're all still here to tell the tale. And so from the Russians' point of view, if they think that NATO is fueling Ukraine and they're getting drones all the way into here, these absolutely are probing operations for the inevitable clash of the Baltic states, which will be reinforced by German troops, and there already are, in fact, and the rest of the NATO alliance, but we never really know how committed the United States is to anyone. I think a lot of people in Europe are starting to realize that maybe we actually are the assholes in this thing and just trying to bankrupt Germany, trying to create a divide and conquer strategy in Europe, divide the Russians from the Germans, so that, with the whole Nord Stream thing, so that Europe can't industrialize and modernize. I mean, it's already industrialized, but I'm talking about going to the next level. And now they're going to be dependent on the United States. So is this all just a 4D chess move to make Europe dependent on the United States and keep them under the boot heel? Because remember, Germany is still under occupation, guys. Germany, Japan, still under occupation. There's nothing the Japanese want more. And I always say this, and people always forget. The Japanese are, they're honorable people. They're willing to just, eat it when they got to eat it. They're very strong-minded people. But I assure you, when the moment comes that they can get revenge for those nuclear bombs that were dropped on their country, they're going to take it. And I think the American military knows it. A lot of people think, well, you see, look how quickly these things came back to life after the war. That's because they were under occupation. They lost the war. Someone has to lose the war for there to be peace. Otherwise, you have perpetual multipolar Cold War tensions. So somebody has to win. And the only way, unfortunately, somebody wins now is if they are able to survive the nuclear war and then occupy the country so that that they're fighting so that they can't rearm and then just nuke them again someday. So, man, what a crazy, crazy state of affairs. What a crazy state of affairs. 4 years ago, I wasn't even thinking about any of this. And it's just become so abundantly clear that in times of economic contraction and COVID, I got to credit Survival Lily. I quote her all the time when she says that COVID, no matter what the severity was, it was like a wound which is now festering with disease. It was a small cut, but it allowed the disease in. And that disease was economic contraction, decoupling, deglobalization. And here we are today. Wow. Russian military spending is increasing by, get a load of this, 70%. 70%. Russian military spending increased last year by like 30%. Now it is going to comprise, I believe, 40% of all Russian government expenditures. We're talking about 391 billion USD. Now that might not sound like a lot to us who's used to feeding the bloated, pork-filled military-industrial complex. That's not a lot of money when you got to pay for those aircraft carriers. But it's a lot of money when you're an authoritarian government, and I'm not saying that there's not war profiteering that goes on there. I'm sure there is. But, there's that whole saying, which isn't actually true. The Americans created a pen that could write in outer space, cost them $1 billion. The Russians just used a pencil. It's actually false, but there's some truth to that, right? There's some truth that, when you're really, trying to fight a war and you have the support of your people and you have all the centralized controls that you need, you really can make that $391 billion stretch. And what we're seeing now is that this really is an attritional war. If you can make a drone for $1,000 and send 2,000 of those drones at a aircraft carrier strike group, maybe only 2 or 3 get in. It's likely a lot more are going to get in. What did that cost you? A couple $1 million. Okay, and you possibly sink $1 billion pieces of equipment. So the asymmetrical nature, the hybrid warfare components of this, there are so many dimensions of hybrid warfare in World War III that people have not even considered yet. I went over them in a recent video. We're going to be doing a very high production video that I'm really excited about because it's going to put in perspective. It's not all about nukes. The nukes are the penultimate play. Okay, the ultimate play is, I guess, just sticks and stones. But the penultimate play is nuclear weapons. Before that comes a whole lot of shit. From, blocking canals to, hijacking vessels, blowing up dams, asymmetrical style attacks that don't take a lot of effort and resources, but have massive impacts. Now, Elon Musk. Let's just go there. Let's talk about Elon Musk. Okay. I feel bad for Elon Musk. I must say, I feel bad because he's in a predicament. He's trying not to, how can I put this in a way which will be advertiser friendly? He's trying to stay alive. The world is run by gangsters, guys. If you don't realize that, then, you got a lot to learn about life. The world is run by gangsters. You think the mafia is bad? Think about who's in charge, okay? Who has $1 billion in capital under their belt to play with for military purposes. That's the real gangsters that run the world. And you really think, and one of the reasons why I was always, my intuition about any person who had that kind of power to just single-handedly revolutionize the automotive industry and potentially destroy the $1 trillion petro-industrial complex, my initial thought was always, how is this guy alive? How are you doing this? Yeah, he's got a couple bodyguards, but is that really enough when you're going up against the Saudi empire, when you're going up against, everything? Because ultimately, and yes, it's a long play, but eventually that's going to start digging into their revenues down the road, or at least you would think. Some people think otherwise. Some people think it's just going to be, the energy is going to be rerouted. We're going to build more, petrol-based generators, and we're going to power the cars, plug the cars into those. Who knows? But how is this guy still alive? So Elon's in a very difficult predicament, and here's my concern. It's almost like they're trying to get him on board. Why is Elon so important is the question. You really got to ask that. Okay, so is it because they got Facebook unlocked? Is it because they got YouTube unlocked? Is it because they got Google unlocked? Is it because they got, whatever the other ones, Instagram, whatever the other social media platforms? Why Elon? Why is that really a sign of how powerful Twitter is at this point? That they're bringing him there, or that, it's the advertisers coming on that platform? Now, sure, a lot of these other platforms probably are more tightly regulated. You can make that argument than Twitter is. And Twitter is a little more off the cuff. So it's easier to make a Twitter post than it is a video. And a lot of, YouTube videos have been the process of screening, and the AI algorithms that moderate this platform are far more developed and mature and sophisticated in whatever it is they're trying to do. So, but something tells me that his visit there is to make sure that he's on board with what happens next. And what I mean by on board is kind of like, I just jokingly say, Elon got called to the principal's office. It's basically what happened. Because remember what happened before this thing started. Netanyahu and Elon talk, October 7th happens. Now, Elon goes back to Israel, and I worry that something bad is going to happen again. Of course, he did this in order to get AIPAC off his back, get the ADL off his back, and win back the advertising revenue. Still, he's got people who are abandoning the platform. He's hoping to get those advertisers back. The question is, does he even really need them? Will they secretly kind of come back like some American companies are starting to skirt the sanctions with Russia, or how some of these sanctions are being quietly withdrawn? Is that what's going to happen? It's hard to say, but the reason why I kind of feel bad for Elon, I think he is a visionary guy. I think he's a cool guy. You know, from a personal level, I don't agree with his politics. I don't agree with, not all of his politics. Some of it I do agree with. I'd say about 50-50. But I don't necessarily agree with his inculcation into where he was raised and some of his ideological beliefs about, political beliefs about certain things. But I do think that he's trying to not get suicided, basically. And you know, I mean, it's very easy for someone to say, well, you should do this, and so that I can blah, blah, blah. You know, you should risk your entire life's work so that I can get somewhere in life. Yeah, don't do that, okay? That's just not cool. You know, it's very easy when you're not the world's richest man to say you need to risk everything for our cause. And as legitimate as I think the cause is, a lot of people are protesting right now in many respects. I seen a video the other day of a guy whose daughter was killed, and he's holding his daughter in his arms, and he's just smiling. It's like this this defense mechanism that gets activated. The only thing you can do, like, so you don't, you know, want to go do some really, really serious, crazy reactionary shit, is just try to smile with your little dead girl in your arms, okay? As much as I can appreciate, we need to also understand that this small sliver of land of 2 million people is calling the attention of 8 billion people for weeks on end, the largest protest the world has ever seen, bar none. And that factoid alone has not gotten enough attention. So keep it in perspective. He's probably, and I'm not making any apologies. I did, you know, would I play it the same way if I was in his shoes? I'm not in his shoes. I don't know what happens at that level. I don't know the talks and the back rooms that he's been pulled into by the shadowy, chain-smoking people, you know, like Bill Gates, or Bill Hicks jokes about. Probably Bill Gates too. So anyways, man, you know, that's that. Iranians are going to be getting Su-35s and what are the other ones? Mi-28 attack helicopters and Yak-130 trainers. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this behind me, this is the extended run of the footage of their deep underground military bunkers in which they house just massive arsenals of stuff. They have already built an airstrip. As far as I know, it's underground, and they can actually launch the planes from underground. Now, I may be mistaken about that the entranceway or the exit is where the planes will take off from. So they open the doors and the planes, you know, fly out. At least that's what I'm led to believe. So they were doing all this in preparation for the arrival of these Su-35s, which are among the most advanced fighter craft in the world. Now, not as advanced as the F-22 Raptor or even as versatile as the F-35s, even though the F-35s, yes, it's a very contentious talking point to bring up the F-35 in any military conversation, but they're still formidable weapons, and the Iranians do not have a good air force, besides their drones. They have excellent drone technology that they're exporting, and it would definitely be a force to be reckoned with, and they do claim to have hypersonic missiles that have yet to be tested in a high-intensity conflict, so I guess time will tell. But this is important. So they've been preparing what's called their Eagle 44 underground bunker to receive the Su-35 fighter jets, and they're inbound. So let's see what happens. Russia claims, and this is a Russian claim, so don't shoot the messenger. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it's probable. This is another dimension of hybrid warfare. They're claiming that the Ukrainians are using bioweapons. Russia claims Ukraine is using biological weapons. They may deliberately contaminate water sources, including drinking water, food, and supplies, and animal feed. Interestingly, the head of the intelligence department in Ukraine's wife recently got poisoned. I didn't really look into the story enough, but apparently there's a lot of internal conflict, I should say, in Ukraine. In newly acquired territories, the Russian forces discovered many strains transferred from American collections of thermal cultures, as well as frozen biological media for cultivating pathogens of bacterial and viral environment. This is according to Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov. Again, I'm not saying that this is a valid claim, but I'm just bringing it to your attention. Good to know. The head of the Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Protection of Troops of the Armed Forces, and I believe that that was echoed by Dmitry Medvedev, Nuclear Medvedev. So anyways, it is what it is. What are you going to do? North Korea, they're now carrying pistols at this border crossing, this iconic place where Trump walked across and shook the hands of Kim Jong-un. While now these border guards are back to carrying pistols, North Korea is forward deploying a lot of combat equipment, and South Korea is now reactivating the DMZ guard post in Goseong in response to North Korea rebuilding guard posts along the DMZ. Now they've also canceled the no-fly zone over the DMZ. So remember that Kim Jong-un, just a month ago, and I still don't know what the primary reason for this was. Some people suspect that this is a due with preparing for all-out war. But he ordered military food reserves to be restored at all costs. But the interesting thing is that he wanted it to be done a month in advance, almost like in haste, almost as if, concerned that maybe things could go south much sooner, okay? Crimea, as a result of the storm which recently hit Sevastopol, apparently the Kerch Bridge had some defenses along it that were washed away. So the question is Ukraine going to capitalize on this opportunity and try to target the Kerch Bridge once again? Or have enough of the defenses been eroded by the recent storm there for it to matter? Don't know what's going on. China's doing some live fire exercises along the Myanmar border. I don't know enough about Myanmar, but if you do, then you might want to look into it. Apparently, there's been some more shit going down there. In terms of the climate stuff, so we got a Arctic which is 6.5 degrees higher than normal. 6.5 degrees. Now understand that the perturbations in the jet stream that are going to arise with such a hot Arctic are enormous. We're going to see crazy storms. I think Boston just got hit by one that may well be the cause of, or at least partly attributable to what's happening here with the recent storm that happened in and around Ukraine. But 4 degrees Celsius shift in the cold direction is all that's required for an ice age. So 6.5 degrees in the opposite direction. This is the reason why the Russians are building so much military equipment up here and putting so many ports and getting so many icebreakers and nuclear submarines, because they're waiting for the Arctic to melt. The Arctic is melting. The sea ice is getting incredibly thin. The actual coverage, what they call the extent of the ice, continues to surprisingly remain the same, but the old ice underneath is melting at a rapid rate. So the thickness of the ice shrinks every year. At some point, we're going to have what's called a blue ocean event, and that will limit or completely get rid of what's called the albedo effect, so none of the sun's light is going to be reflected off, and then some people think we'll have runaway heating after that point in time. And that's when things get wildly interesting, because the jet stream, which is supposed to look like that, starts to look like this, all crazy, okay? That's because what you want is a nice cold top. This is the air conditioner of the planet. You want it to be nice and cold up there and hot along the equator. That balances out those high and low pressure systems, and it makes a nice wavy sort of jet stream. But if this gets hotter up here and this is still hot here, then the jet stream just turns into chaos. And that's why you had that Texas incident a couple of years ago. That's why we're going to see all kinds of wacky weather. Right now, it is drier than hell up here. There's no snow on the ground, which is insane for coming into December 1st. No snow. This is the SPEI. I believe it is the evapotranspiration index or something to that extent. I messed that one up. I butchered that one, but this will show you the global drought situation, okay? So you can see anything reddish to reddish brown is in a state of drought. Now, this fluctuates from year to year. We know that and the reason why we care about this as preppers, because the price of food. The crazier the weather gets, the more energy you need to put into the system to grow food. And just to, make sure that we can keep the lights on. The more air conditioners you got to run. The more heaters you got to run in certain places where maybe you didn't need heaters before, and now you need air conditioners in places where you didn't before. So this just messes with things. It throws a wrench in the whole thing. So it means more energy, which increases energy costs. There's going to be places which you're not going to be able to grow food, or insurance companies are just not going to want to deal with it. So farmers aren't going to operate there. So what we have happening here this year, and this fluctuates wildly. We know that in California, it was drier than hell. There was people who were worried about, whole towns that had to be evacuated because the aquifers ran dry. Then last year we had massive flooding. Okay, just this tsunami of a deluge of rain in a very short period of time. But this is the thing, we get more extreme events. I always say we're entering the age of extremes. That's not limited to politics. That's not limited to conflict. That's climate as well. We're entering the age of extremes because of the jet stream anomaly I just talked about. So anything in reddish brown is insanely dry. Right now in Brazil, it is insanely dry in the rainforest of all places. Very low precipitation. In Canada, this is where the wildfires occurred. Very low precipitation. And now we're only entering El Nino, where it's typically very dry. So we could very well see, if this trend continues, and I'm not saying it's going to, because we could just have a rapid switch in the other direction, okay? We could see floods in BC like we did in 2020. We've seen, extremely dry, the driest conditions I've ever seen in my life. And then, later that year we had a deluge. It was wiped out. It was like one of the worst disasters in Canadian history. But up here you can see dry as hell. We may well see biblical scale fires. We already did last year. 3 times the amount of area was burned last year than the previous record. Okay, so think about that. The previous record was tripled this time around. That's how many smoke days we had. And, people just, the new Oculus Rift is coming out. Grand Theft Auto is going to be out, really? Here's what people do when they got too much fucking time on their hands. This is what they do. I just deleted it. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Okay, there it is. There it is. I can't even really show you it because it's probably going to be some stupid. Okay, so this is what they do in Japan, okay? In Japan, as you know, the birth rate is plummeting, okay, as are their standards, apparently. This is what happens when a civilization has too much time on its hands. It ends. It just simply ends. Because, what else is there to do? This is what we have to look forward to. Childless, marrying robots, getting slap therapy, engaging in weird, sadomasochistic robot sex. Who knows what's coming next, man? I mean, who really knows? Chimeras, really the sky's the limit as to how stupid this can get at this point. This is clown world. Here's another clown world for you. Where is the other clown world? Oh, here it is. Okay, so this guy, he's one of the hostages on the Honey Badger ship, the Houthi ship. And the Houthis who hijacked this vessel, they took it to their port, And they're having a party on this ship night after night. And this is one of the hostages. He's got his phone, so you know they don't give a rip about like security or anything. These guys are just having a good old time. They're chewing cat, which is like a stimulant that you chew. They're singing, they're smoking shisha. I mean, you know, this is just weird, man. It's just weird. And remember, these are the people that barter with bullets. You can walk into a store and buy things with bullets. We got to do a case study, an in-depth case study on the Houthis, man, because whether you agree with their politics or not, they're a fascinating people from a preparedness perspective. There is no denying that. Yeah, in Buffalo, there was some major snow stuff. So get your snow gear, guys. You can still get 10% off at CanadianPreparedness.com. Get your winter gear. Get a propane heater in your car. Remember what happened last year when people were trapped in their cars and they froze to death? I mean, freezing to death has to be on par with like drowning or burning on fire. I mean, I couldn't imagine it. But yeah, make sure you have a little propane heater in your car. That's all it takes to potentially save your life. If you can endure a storm like that for 12 to 24 hours, I'm not saying that, of course, with preppers, we're always prepared for the end of the world, but in the very least, that's better than nothing. And you can ration that. You can turn it on. You can slow it down. And we have ones that are small that you can fit in your car. I'll post links in the description. Or you can get bigger ones for ice fishing or outdoor activities and things of that nature. All right. What else we got here? Russia is testing out its Bastion what is it called? Anti-naval missiles. I had a video to show you about that, but I think we're going to skip that one today just because this is going on a little long. As for the thing in China, the reason why I don't talk about it and the reason why I don't get excited about these things is I'm not saying it's not going to be a thing, but it's very, very unlikely that we are going to see any more lockdown level controls put in place. It would take something on the scale of bird flu or, you know, maybe some new swine flu variant, or it'd have to be something new because I don't think people are going to be going for this, and it's just not going to happen. Now, however, what did somewhat pique my interest in this, and I'm sure it's piqued Pfizer's interest as well, is the fact that it's affecting children, okay? And so I'm not sure if it's just children or if it's younger people in general, but if it's something that is attacking children now, and maybe, you know, you got to understand that the virus that was going around for the last few years, I'm no virologist, but when you've gotten rid of all the old people, or when you've ran through that part of the population, and we knew that kids weren't really seriously impacted by it, at least on the whole, and let's not even go there because it's a huge debate unto itself. We're not going there. I'm sick and tired of talking about it. I'm not talking about any sort of contagion until we have at least north of a 2% kill rate, that is, okay? Then I'm going to get in and upper. Even a 1% across the map kill rate is pretty serious when you think about it, because then that also includes maybe 10 to 20% of the people that get deathly ill but don't die. And then you get maybe another 25% that are very ill, but it's not deathly and they don't have to be hospitalized. And then you have your people who maybe aren't even really fazed by it. But a 1% across the map, across all age brackets, that's actually pretty scary. That's 70 million people on the planet, 80 million people now. So, if it were to happen, then yeah, I would be mildly concerned. So maybe I'll scale that back. I'll say 1% kill rate across the map. I'll give it a second look. But this, I don't know. It's hard to say though, because we are in the age, also, we need to understand, and I'm not saying that's what this is, we're in the stage of World War III and hybrid warfare. And the Chinese let it go. They opened the floodgates. Remember, people were revolting. They said, okay, you want us to open the floodgates? They were locked down tight, 24/7 lockdown for years, 2 years, until they finally just said, okay, there's riots. Let's just, screw it. That was it. And then, it kind of fizzled out. So what's up with that? And they compromised their own economy. Remember that, right? So I still don't understand what the true motive of all that was. I still think there was perhaps some ulterior motive that the Chinese were trying to do in shooting themselves in the foot. Maybe it's just part of their culture that they're very averse to biological contagions. But, and you know, wearing masks is a pretty culturally appropriate thing there, which is why they took to the masks very easily. They were already wearing masks from the pollution days of old. So, you know, but here, I remember when I was the first one to wear a mask in the store because I didn't know what was going on. And that's the thing with preppers is, you know, when there is a serious threat, we take it seriously. When we realize that, okay, maybe the threat isn't as serious as was really made out, then that's when we use common sense. You know, I'm going to end on this note, man, because I was in the grocery store today, and I don't know what's wrong with the kids nowadays. Other people's kids, of course, not my kids. It's always other people's kids, right? But something's not right. I'm walking through the grocery store, and this kid's pushing a cart. I don't know where his mom is. I mean, there's kids running all over the place, parentless children just running all around. You know, I was used to criticize those leashes that people put their kids on, but now I'm starting to realize, well, maybe some people should have that for their kids. But kids just running riot, that's fine. I like kids. I have no problem with, you know. But this kid is pushing this cart, had to at least be 12 years old, at least. Now, my kids had common sense and decency, you know, ingrained into them from the time they knew how to use it, 5, 6 years old. You show people respect, you show people courtesy. This kid is coming out of an aisle. I'm walking this way, okay, so we're perpendicular, right? And I see him, like typically, you know, when you're walking and you don't have a cart, I presume you have the right of way. In this situation, it was one of those situations where I kind of had the right of way. Now, understandably, the kid doesn't have his license yet. He's 12 years old. But he just runs into me and he sees me. We make eye contact, right? And I'm like, you're going to run into me. And he just keeps coming and he runs in me. And then I stop and I say, you know, watch where you're going. And then he just like, he's looking dead ahead like some zombie. And he's just like, And this kid wasn't like, you know, I'm pretty sure he wasn't autistic. He didn't have any like, you know, mental health conditions. I'm pretty good at detecting that because I used to work in that line of work. This is just kid with iPad brain who has been let out into the world for half an hour with his mother and has been given this freedom to push this device around into people. I mean, you know, I understand it's just a small thing, and I'm not losing sleep over this, but it just, you know, because I've had so many instances like that with people nowadays where it's just like, you know, what's going on? Like you have zero common sense, zero decency whatsoever. I mean, we are finished as a society. It's over. I just go to the pods hotels in Japan, get yourself some slap therapy, get yourself a nice tiny home in the suburbs that they're building these mass tiny home divisions now. And, you know, you're probably going to have your VR room. What do they call it? The holodeck room or something like that. And just order, skip the dishes, and just don't leave the house ever again. Okay? And just do us all a favor. And for the rest of y'all, keep on prepping, baby. Because the shit hit the fan is getting close. Day by day, we get closer and closer. I know it's incremental. It's much more long-winded than Hollywood has taught us it would be, but it's coming, man. It is coming. Something big is coming. And you can tell by the price of gold just slowly creeping up. Just slowly going over 2,000, over 2,020, over 2,040. Maybe it's going to pull back a little bit. Something's going on, guys. Just stay ready. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.